All right, and welcome to another movie comm. And in this one, we're going to be talking while watching Dennis the Menace, 1994. And I am watching this on DVD, and we're just about to make the transition from where Bugs Bunny appears next to the Warner Bros. Logo, and then we end up going into the film. So it's currently paused. So if you're going to follow along, that's where you want to start. I know some people are doing this from streaming services, or other people might be doing it from DVD, but whatever it is, that's where I'm at. So get ready to press play in five, four, three, two, one. Press play. So this is one of those movies to where you don't want to underestimate the kid. And go figure, it's a John Hughes production because and Nick Castle made this film, who also made Major Payne and who also played the original Michael Myers in Halloween and actually reprised his role in the more recent films for a few scenes here and there. So pretty fun facts over there as you start that out, right? So go figure, the guy that actually played Michael Myers is known to direct some really interesting comedies. And with a John Hughes production, another very famous franchise is obviously Home Alone. And I kind of wanted to take a different direction in terms of which one of these movies I would commentate over first. So Dennis the Menace just seemed very unique because for me personally, it was different. I remember seeing this movie in the theaters and I laughed my butt off. And obviously, I was familiar with Walter Matthau from Grumpy Old Men or whatnot. So I thought it hit all the right spots for when it did. Now, this obviously took place in 1994. Well, it was released in 1994, so it was probably filmed 6 months to a year prior. And of course, you've also got Leah Thompson in the film, who also played Mrs. McFly in the Back to the Future, and as well as Christopher Lloyd, who also played in Back to the Future as Doc Brown. So when you've got a cast of people like this, you really can't go wrong, especially if the writing is good enough. And obviously, this is a franchise, and again, it was the first, I believe, the first movie of the Dennis the Menace iteration, and for me, it was hilarious. I ended up getting the film on VHS as well when it came out because it was a fun overall movie to watch as well as a funny movie to watch. And to this day, I actually get some enjoyment out of it. I mean, I may not laugh like crazy, but it makes me chuckle. But obviously, when you're a kid, sometimes it's the simplest things that make you laugh. And for some adults, that changes, and for others, it doesn't. I can only speak for myself. At this point, I just kind of get a chuckle, but I kind of like the atmosphere of the film. Like, 'cause it's obviously a very fun type of film, right? It's a film that you go to have fun into, and you just laugh. And then obviously Mr. Wilson right now is getting ready to pretend that he's not feeling well and going back into bed as soon as he hears Dennis coming up the street with the up the crosswalk with his bike. And Walter Matthau just plays it so perfectly. And of course, hey, Mr. Wilson, I'm sure he doesn't want to be hearing that. So that was like very memorable. I remember my mom took me to see this, and she was always like, "Hey, Mr. Wilson." She just like that. But she got a kick out of it. She laughed a lot, and so did I. And again, good times in the '90s, man. Good times. It was one of the films that we actually went to go see. I believe the other film was Ninja Turtles 3 and one other one, if I'm not mistaken. Oh yeah, the other one was The Mask, but that was in 1995. So those are the three films that I remember that mom took me to. So again, another little part of the childhood that, and of course, he's whispering in his ear, and he's like, with Mr. Wilson is just snoring, and he's just talking. He's not even, Dennis is not even whispering or whatnot. He doesn't really care about waking him up or not. He's like examining him. His heart sounds like our washing machine. I think I vaguely remember some adults just laughing at some of the lines that Dennis said. So like, oh my gosh, he's growing extra skin. So um, I'm sure a lot of grandparents must have gotten a really big kick out of this movie. You know what I mean? Because I don't know what it is. Also, one thing that I really love about people that are older is their sense of humor is definitely intact. Like the majority of them, not all of them, but the majority of them have certainly have a sense of humor about them, which is awesome to see. And they can often take the simplest things and make them funny as hell, or interpret them funny as hell. So you can't help but admire something like that. And then when you say something like, if you tell them an old school joke, they'll actually appreciate it and they'll laugh because they grew up listening to that joke. So for me, I think another thing is that like they just get a kick out of the simple things, and the old stuff is still funny or whatnot. Kind of like the stuff that I grew up listening to is still funny, but I don't know. I don't know if that'll change. I don't know if it rotates, um, but yeah, over here, Mr. Wilson had a whole brand new pack of aspirin, and Dennis just yeah, the whole child-proof cap didn't work on him, so he tries to give him an aspirin or whatnot. So, and it's one of the bigger aspirins too. It looks like a 360 milligram, or however many milligrams it is in the 300s. I don't remember at this point. My mom takes a baby aspirin every day, so, and that's a bigger one. So, and of course, it's not working when he tries to give him the aspirin. He almost got his fingers bit off, and of course, he's going to take out the good old slingshot. Back in the 90s, I don't know how it is today with kids. Back in the 90s, man, this the slingshot used to be a very coveted thing to have. So, and I have the feeling that, who knows, maybe they let Dennis keep the slingshot after filming was done. Who knows? I wouldn't be surprised if they did, or if he just took it. And of course, Dennis gets the aspirin in Mr. Wilson's mouth, causing him to wake up and like kind of anyway, spit it out, so to speak. It actually went down his throat. Go figure. And that was a really cool effect with that, fake mouth that kept opening, and thought it was opening and closing. And then his parents were wondering where Dennis was. It's like, I was at Mr. Wilson's house. Boy, is he sick. You didn't bother him, did you? No, but I gave him an aspirin. He don't like him any better than me. And I'm like, I thought that, and now that I will say that that's funny. So, oh shit. So, yeah, I really like that. And then Mr. Wilson is screaming on the other side of the phone when the Dennis' parents call him and see how he's feeling, and he's like, "Talk to him." And yeah, well, talk to him. I wasn't like that when I was a child. Oh man, and now she's pissed at him, and Dad is wondering what the hell did he do. And she's like, "Did you shoot an aspirin into Mr. Wilson's mouth?" And Dad is like, "Oh my gosh, no." Like, I don't want him to bite off my fingers with his fake teeth. At least, see, that's the thing. Even at his young age, he's like, he's probably like 6 years old, and he's like, I don't want to bite off my fingers with his big fake teeth. Those things are sharp. So at least he knows that he's got fake teeth. So, and Dennis in his own way was just trying to help Mr. Wilson. He's like, I thought he was sick. I was only trying to help. And the good old punishment: go sit in the corner and think about what you've done. uh Basically, like, if you went to a good school when you were in elementary school, in a good school in a good neighborhood, like, sometimes the teachers would punish you by making you, quote unquote, sit in the corner, but obviously that never worked very well. So it's like, you go sit in the corner. So kind of reminds me of one of David Chappelle's episodes, where the white kid goes to live with a black family, and then the black kid goes to live with a white family. And they show him, it's like, you go sit in a corner, young man. The white family has that kind of punishment, and then the dad's like, you better shut the hell up before I beat the snot out of you, or something like that. With the whole sit in the corner, that's exactly what it reminds me of. Go figure. And yeah, Mr. Wilson, of course, just basically telling Mr. Mitchell that his kid is driving him nuts. He's like, hey, I'll talk to him again. And I'm like, when my old man, you want to teach me something, he taught me with his belt. He's like, that's not how we do with my son, Mr. Wilson. So old school and new school. I wonder what the new old school and new school is going to be in this upcoming day and age in terms of how parents handle things nowadays. And yeah, Walter Matthau just really does a great job in the film in terms of bringing out. So in terms of Mr. Wilson, like the one that seems like he hates kids but he doesn't, and then you get the different Mr. Wilson who's also like a garden master, and then you get the other Mr. Wilson that you see later on in the film, like towards the end of the film, to where he actually shows like who he really is, and he's not just that the old grump that he seems to be, at least not all the time, you know. So, and in terms of the character of Mr. Wilson, I think Walter Matthau was cast very well, and I think he did his job very well, and he got to show the multitude of sides of to Mr. Wilson, because at the end of the day, Mr. Wilson is a good guy, at least to my knowledge. At least that's how he interprets it in this film. So at this point right now, he's really concerned with his gardening, and Martha, his wife, is constantly reminding him, "Hey, he's only a boy," and it's true. But he's like, "I can't stand that kid. He's a menace." So, but at the end of the film, though, things really come full circle as always, which is great. So, but yeah, he's got a very beautiful garden, though. I don't know, like even by today's standards, I think this garden would be a hell of a garden at this point. If you're like a gardener, I mean, it's something that you can certainly appreciate that was depicted in the film. And I'm assuming the character of Mr. Wilson is also a gardener, like in the. I think this originally came from a comic or something like that. Like the character of Dennis the Menace, either a comic or a cartoon. But if it was something that they added in the film, then it was like, okay, great. But if not, it's you're a gardener, you kind of appreciate it. So 40-year investment for 10 seconds of split. Wow, that's dedication right there. And Dennis does not want to go to Martha's house because apparently she's more of a pain in the ass than he is, and she does not like that. And or excuse me, he does not like that. And then mom is not going to be a stay-at-home mom anymore, and she's going to go to work. And Dennis is being really quiet. There's another kid that's at Margaret's house. And this is a funny scene right here. You see this little kid named Joey, and then you got Margaret, and she's like mean. She's like, "Do it. I can make you." And he's like, "Oh yeah, how?" And she just puts her fist on the table like, "I'll beat you." You can't hit a girl. I can too. Boys are like that and girls aren't. That is this little girl over here like plays her role so well in this film. It's hilarious. Yeah, I find myself laughing at this stuff. Yeah, it's still funny. It's not as funny as it was when I was a kid, but it's still funny. Or I was laughing at this stuff that the adults were laughing at, and then whenever the kids would laugh at stuff, it's like adults would just be quiet. So, like obviously, I laughed at this when I was a kid when he made the kid kiss the butt of the freaking doll, and the look on his face. And then you got Dennis who just refuses to go to Margaret's house, and his mom has to drag him inside. He's acting like a baby according to her, and he's just playing dead, and it's hilarious. Like he's doing a really good, he's really playing dead. He's doing a good job at it too. And poor mom, she's probably embarrassed. Neighborhoods actually look like this in the 90s, by the way. I don't remember. I guess it depends on where you live. But I'm assuming this is how it actually looked in the comics or in the cartoons. So, because I never really got into the cartoon, if that was a thing. I just watched the movie, and that's all I ever saw of Dennis the Menace. And ever since then, it's been a different kid playing Dennis. But for me, this is always my Dennis the Menace. Just like just like with all due respect to Home Alone, you know, Macaulay Culkin's Kevin McAllister is always going to be my Home Alone, so to speak. And I will eventually get to commentating that because I really want to do. Home Alone is a very legendary movie. Like, I don't think anybody can deny that. Specifically the first two. And both of them were good. Usually the second movie ends up having a curse of not being as good as the first, but um Home Alone 2, in my opinion, was just as good as the first. It did pretty much everything that the first did, except Kevin was a little bit older, but and you had the new traps and stuff like that, and it took place in New York, and but for the most part, it did a rinse and repeat of what the first film did, which was actually a good move because the first movie did everything so well. So I would say like the first one would probably get better, would get like an extra point on a grading scale because it was the original to do what it did. But the second one didn't do anything wrong by doing a rinse and repeat because it just works really well for that film. And then over here, these kids want to build a fort on this treehouse and stuff like that. And apparently, Margaret's got a little bit of a crush on Dennis, and Dennis wants nothing to do with it. So, and then she's talking about how she wants to decorate it and everything like that. And poor Joey over here, he's just constantly on the other end of Margaret's verbal slaps, so to face. But it's hilarious. Like you listen to that little girl, the way she talks and shit, it's gonna make you laugh your ass off. So you got this gardening contest over here to see who wins first place or something like that, and George Wilson is just extremely nervous about it because he really wants to make first place, and I guess it was decided that George actually won. So big moment for him. So he doesn't smile all that much, like too much in the film, except for that moment, and then obviously at the end of that. So again, character development, even in a movie like this, character development. And obviously, you got your old neighborhood classic hide and seek, and then you got this other kid over here who's really short that's helping Dennis cheat. And then you got the old grump Mr. Wilson coming out to where the girls tried to hide in the front of his yard, and these girls, you know, scared them away. And he tells Martha how he was unbeatable in hiding in, or at hide and seek, and he had a nose for hiding places. And she's like, "Weren't you fat?" And he's like, "I was husky." Oh, and watch this. Mr. Wilson's looking along, and obviously Dennis is cheating. He's using the other kid as a spy. The Beckman kid, that's right. His last name is Beckman. She's like, leave him alone, George. And he's like, I'm gonna even things up. Gunther, I'm talking to your daddy on the telephone. He's going to the ice cream store and he wants to take you with him. And then the kid gets excited and he's like, "Go, hurry up and go home." And he's that kid's look in his eyes, like just before he starts running, he's like, "Oh, ice cream," you know. And he's like, "You lied to a kid, George, to a toddler." And he starts laughing about it. He's like, "Think about how disappointing he's going to be when he gets home." And this is kind of funny. He's like, "You better get used to it. Disappointment's going to be a big part of his life. He's a foot short for his age, and he's cross-eyed." And she just looks at him like she's just looking at him like she gives him like a death stare for a second there, like you're such an asshole. Oh man. Oh, Mr. Wilson. And over here, we see the train, and we are introduced to Christopher Lloyd's character, in which he plays a thief. And the makeup job on him is really good, and the mouthpiece to where he's got those fake teeth, really good. I remember when I first saw him smile, like right after he jumps off of the train. Um, I was like, damn, I better start brushing my teeth every day. But it looked good, though. It looked good. Took a hell of a jump, and obviously that was a stuntman that did that. And good old Christopher Lloyd, man. I bet they don't even lock their doors. Yeah, a good neighborhood like that back in the early 90s. Who knows? Maybe there were some neighbors that didn't. Uh but yeah, I don't know. Regardless of whatever neighborhood you live in, I mean, I should always knock should always lock your doors. I don't in my area where I live at, you don't live too far from the beach. So, I'm not too far from the beach. I'm like a couple miles away from the beach, and in the neighborhoods that I used to drive by, or that I do drive by every once in a while just to look at the houses and just enjoy the sights and stuff like that, put myself in a different atmosphere, because there's amazing houses and neighborhoods back there, right? And I like nice houses and neighborhoods and stuff like that. Most guys are car guys. Me, I'm a house guy. So, um, uh, I remember saying to myself, and one time a friend came along with me for the ride, and I remember saying like, if there were like 8-year-old kids running around at this time of night at midnight, chances are they wouldn't get kidnapped. They would need no supervision whatsoever. They would not. Nope, definitely not. Like the neighborhood was quiet. There was like seriously, like and during the daytime when you see people walking around, they would actually you could be in your car and they'll wave at you. And they weren't even not even all of them were super old either. They would just wave at you. It was super duper friendly. And when you waved at them, they wouldn't be like, "What the fuck is he waving at me for?" They'd be like, "Hello, how are you?" But anyway, over here they're having a debate. Margaret and Dennis are having a debate about men and women. He's like, you got better things to do. Like what? Play golf and drink beer? No. Like hunting, having wars, driving cars, shaving, cleaning fish. Do you know how to do that? Talking about who's better, men or women. Oh shit. Like the baby is in her stomach. She has to get it installed. Her stomach isn't just filled up with babies. Who installs them? A minister and a doctor. How? How? And then Joey's like laughing. She wants to know how, and and then she gives him the death stare, like I'm gonna beat the fuck out of you. Dude, this little girl's hilarious. And then Dennis is like, the belly button, it opens up. How come men have them? So they don't look weird in bathing suits. And then she just has a look of confusion, like, you could be right. Oh man, can you imagine trying to put a nail in it's like, let's do this Dennis the Menace style. It's like have your close friend hold it and then just move it at the last second. Oh shit. Yeah. Yeah, I'd have to say this movie still holds up well in terms of that kind of humor. It's like tongue in cheek humor, but you can't help but laugh at it. I mean, you're not doing an intense belly laugh or anything, but it's like sometimes it's just the script writing. And then Christopher Lloyd is down there and he sees the fake baby doll, and he decides to steal it. Man, you gotta be a pretty ruthless thief to steal from a child, especially when it's their only doll. And then they go down from the tree house and the fort that they're building or whatnot, and she's almost about to cry, but then she just goes on the warpath and she's like, "Give me my doll, I don't have it." So, and then she's like, "I've been robbed." Poor little poor little Joey's like, "No, I was sleeping with you." Like, you swear you didn't take it? Yep, I've been robbed. And she's actually right. So, and they're like, "There's no robbers in our town." Well, there is now. And again, just Christopher Lloyd just does an amazing job in the film. It's just the little subtle ways in the way he walks and in the way he plays a very perfect comic villain. Got the cigarette, the long hair, and just got a little bit of swag going on. And you can tell he's not from that neighborhood because he obviously stands out. Walking by the backyard or front yard of neighborhood, and there he is. There's that little Bankman kid, just chilling. I think it's him. Yeah, I think it's him. And he's about to steal this kid's apple. And takes the kid's apple, and the kid looks like he's about to cry, but he doesn't exactly cry, at least not fully. So takes the kid's apple and he starts, and that's a good looking apple too. Oh, and I think another thing that they did with Christopher Lloyd's character in this film is they gave him prosthetic ears, like they gave him like really big ears, and I just noticed that. I don't think those are Christopher Lloyd's ears just by looking at like the additions that they made. Really good makeup job and prosthetics that they used for him. Dennis looking for paint in Dad's garage, and he finds his slingshot. Goes to get it, the paint falls down, and whoops! And that's exactly what he says. Whoops! And I like it. He's going to use a vacuum cleaner to clean it up. And here comes the babysitter, and she came with a helmet. So my girlfriend used to babysit for Dennis. She said bring a helmet and wear pants. So you have to be really brave if you want to babysit for Dennis. And rightfully so. I swear. Classic indeed. Picking up paint with a vacuum cleaner, you gotta love it. And it's like when parents see this scene in the movie theater, I'm pretty sure they were like, "Oh gosh, where is this going?" So, because obviously, picking up paint with a vacuum cleaner is not a good idea. But there's an in and out button, and Dennis loves to push buttons, so it's like it gets the paint out. It literally shoots it out like a gun. And Mr. Wilson is doing yeah, his barbecue, and then that paint ends up falling right onto his chicken. Go figure, just his luck. And here comes the other dude, Picky. I'm sorry, not Picky. Mickey, looking for Polly, the babysitter. And he's getting he's combing his hair and shit. And and apparently she's excited about him coming over. And then Dennis has that look on his face like, oh boy. Oh shit. Yeah, yeah. Just after I've not seen this movie for a little while, I have to say it still really does hold up well. I'll give them that. It still does hold up well. I guess. Oh man, I guess I'm just finding all the old school stuff funnier now than I have in a long time. So, oh, but here comes Walter Matt. That was facial expressions. He's like, oh, something's up, wrong. Thankfully, he didn't swallow it, or else he would have gotten paint poisoning or whatever. But it tastes funny. Like it tastes like paint and wood. Like I'll make you some sandwiches. And then he thinks he's like it had to be Dennis. So he actually is curious enough to actually go and investigate the garage of his neighbor because Dennis has been fooling around with paint and he wants to prove it. But Dennis right now is being told a story by a guy that can't read, even though he's like maybe in high school. So, and then he questions Dennis about the book. Like, what's the point of reading lies? Dennis playing with the army men, which was a huge thing back in the day. I don't know how much of a how much of an impact they are now, but army men were cool back in the day. And then plus he's got some really cool toys in the bathtub as well. So Dennis is like, are you ready to? Mickey's like, are you ready to get out of there? He's like, and go to bed. He's like, I'm not even wrinkled up yet. Poor guy, can't read. I guess the director of this film really wanted to make a point to where it's like, hey, you high school students need to kind of focus on your reading and your comprehension. And Martha's like, are you seriously gonna break into this guy's taking this bit far, George? He's just a boy. Oh man. And Dennis obviously like he can't sleep, so he's walking down and he sees those his two babysitters are making out and he's about to freaking laugh his ass off. If I was Dennis's age, I probably would have been laughing too. I would have tried to pull a prank on them somehow, some way or something. So while Mr. Wilson's trying to get into Dennis's house, Dennis sneaks out of the house and rings the door. Rings the doorbell and runs away. And her hair is a mess too. That's hilarious. Nobody's there, and Dennis is just laughing nonstop. And of course, rinse and repeat. The only thing I have to say about that scene is when she pulls him down to start making out again, you can clearly see that they weren't even close to having their faces close together. So they could have done a little bit of a better job on that. And oh well. Dennis rings the door a second time and then makes a run for it. And babysitters are not happy about that because they're impatient and they want to keep making out and possibly round third base or round second base. Point. So Mickey decides to put a needle or a thumbtack or whatever with tape in front of the doorbell ringer, and obviously Dennis saw it all, but Mr. Wilson, on the other hand, has no idea. Oh, this is funny. He's looking at the vacuum cleaner sucking up the golf ball and then exiting it out and hitting him in the butt. Classic 90s humor, cartoon humor. There's some definitely some cartoon humor in this film. Dennis goes to ring it again the third time, but he obviously not going to mess with it because of the thumbtack that's on it. Oh, Mr. Wilson's butt is killing him because of the golf ball. One of his shoes somehow came off. I don't know how that happened. he's, he's like, I got him this time. Mitchell can't deny it. Dennis goes back into his house through the doggy door. One of the benefits is when you're that small and when you're that young, it's like, yeah, you can fit the doggy door. Mr. Wilson goes to ring the doorbell and his thumb falls for it. And then, of course, he gets water dumped on his head from the second floor and then flour thrown on his face. he goes back home. Martha sees him, and he's all covered in flour, and it's like, he's only a boy, huh? And she's laughing, and she's laughing. And the thing is, it wasn't even Dennis this time that did anything. And then, of course, you get the scene of the robber or the thief, Christopher Lloyd, doing his thing, breaking into people's houses and easily just stealing. And the next morning, Dennis wants to go say hi to Mr. Wilson and say an I'm sorry, and give him an I'm sorry letter. Hey, and I just noticed Mrs. Wilson was actually making oatmeal. Oh, and he confessed that he shot chicken in their confessed about the paint in the chicken cart. Um, but it was accidental. He didn't mean to do it. But Mrs. Wilson lets Dennis go upstairs and put the letter next to his whisker cutter. But he ends up having a little too much fun and accidentally does something else. And he reveals to Mrs. Wilson that on Sundays, Dennis's mom and dad wrestle. Oh, that's funny. And Mrs. Wilson kind of gets the point. She's like, oh, okay, you can go up, but just don't disturb Mr. Wilson. Oh shit. But this time, when Dennis goes into Mr. Wilson's room, he's actually really asleep this time. So he's not faking it, and he has no idea that Dennis is going to be there. So Dennis goes to put the letter under the under the whisker cutter or whatever, but it's revealed that Mr. Wilson's it was under a jar or something like that, yeah. And Dennis can't help it because he notices that the Mr. Wilson's teeth are in that jar, so he decides to play with it. Kind of seen as toys to kids, reminds them of Halloween. So that's I'm the doctor, open up and say ah. And then he opens and then he just slams him way too hard and the two front teeth fall out. And uh-oh. And again, Dennis tries to help one more time. But what he does is he gets some chiclets and replaces the two front teeth that fell out with those, because those two front teeth fell down the drain. So you couldn't super glue them back on, even if that was an option. So that's what Dennis has in his little safe. He's got a dollar bill, some chiclets, and what else did I see? Like a Butterfinger bar. That's right. Man, you know what? I've been laying off bad sugar and I've been eating fruit instead. But I'm not gonna lie, I was so tempted today to have something sweet. And you know what? If I had a Butterfinger bar like right next to me right now, I'd probably eat it. Why do the best tasting things have to be the worst for you? But at the same time, you can still make healthy stuff taste good, thank God. But still, my go-to dessert lately has been apples or bananas and peanut butter. Like the good peanut butter too. The good peanut butter is worth it, man. And Mr. Wilson's ready to get his picture taken for being honored for his garden. And guess what? When he smiles, you get the chiclet smile. I remember my mom laughed really hard at this scene because he looked really funny. And then Walter Matthau just keeps the smile going like 100%. He just keeps that smile up like that. It's hilarious. I remember laughing my ass off at that too as a kid. I laughed like really hard. I laughed so hard you couldn't hear me. That's how hard I laughed. Those are the best laughs right there, like where you laugh so hard where you can barely be heard. Oh man. And of course, we got our friend Christopher Lloyd here, aka the thief, that literally just stole a purse right as the cop was coming around. Well, yeah, right as the cop was coming around the corner. Like literally put his jacket over a purse to do a little trick to steal it. Cop calls him over and he grabs it. Never seen you around here before. Does the thing with his teeth. Oh, that's hilarious. Little cop and criminal conversation or whatnot. So, we got away with the purse. And Mrs. Mitchell is about to find out that she's not going to be able to get covered for work. So they have to figure out who to call. And in this upcoming scene here, after this scene is over, it's like they go through quite a lot to see if, like around the neighborhood, they call the entire neighborhood to see if they can get somebody to watch over Dennis because they're both going to be gone. And guess what? Like everybody hangs up basically. Like as soon as she says, "Hey, it's Mrs. Mitchell" or "It's Mr. Mitchell," guess what? Boom, hang up. So, because good old Dennis has built a reputation until they finally find Mr. and Mrs. Wilson's name in their little catalog, and then one of them ends up calling, and of course, I'm sure it was Martha that said yes. If it was George, he would have. I don't know if he would have hung up, but I don't know. But they were the last person. They were the last ones that called. So, and that's when the adventure really starts to kind of pick up because Dennis likes Mr. Wilson. So, yeah, another thing as well. It's like, when you're a parent and if you're working, it's like you gotta have like you gotta constantly prioritize your schedule because your kid, needs to be watched. Oh, cool. One of those phones was like one of those see-through phones where you can see the lights on the inside of the phone and stuff. It's pretty cool. Oh, one lady, I remember one lady didn't hang up at all. One guy in a cast was laughing, and then person in one person just said no. And it's daytime, and now it's nighttime, and the sun's going down as they're looking for more numbers. And I guess back in the day, a lot of the neighbors would just have each other's phone numbers. I guess. Oh, and Mr. Wilson the next morning looks at the paper and he sees his picture right there with a smile with the chiclets. And then, of course, Dennis is right there and he's got a BB gun right, around his around his shoulder. He's like, "Hey, Mr. Wilson, I'm sleeping at your joint. I brought you some grasshoppers." Cool. Dennis is hilarious. He's like, "I brought my pillow so I don't get my spit all over yours." I'm sure that's not the only reason why you bring your pillow. It's also because of comfort. Nothing quite like your own bed, nothing quite like your own pillow. Which can make a difference. I don't know, for me, for whatever reason, I guess it didn't make the biggest difference for me. For me, I'm more of the bed guy. I don't know. But right now, I think the bed would make the biggest difference in the world. And if you've got a good, if you truly have a good bed, it's like you can't really ever go back once you find the kind of bed that you want, in which your body responds really well to. And speaking of beds, I highly recommend investing in a good bed that will last you a while, and that's also good for your body. You know, because some beds are just bad for your back in the long run, and for the most part, you're gonna have your bed for years. So, highly recommend a good bed because, like, even a bad bed can give you like back problems and stuff. Oh, and looky here. First day there, and it's raining outside, and Dennis is bored. Well, Mr. Wilson is actually checking out his gold coins, which is pretty cool. And one of the things that sucks is when you have a kid that's full of energy like Dennis, and uh, if he's bored and he's stuck in the house, it sucks. Mr. Wilson's just chill, enjoying his quiet time, and Dennis asks him some really interesting questions. First, he wants to do stuff with him, and then he's looking at the gold. Mr. Wilson's like, "What? Like, is that pirate's gold?" Like, no. Is it real valuable? Yes. Is that why you keep it in your safe? Uh huh. 5-year-old asking an old man questions. How come that safe looks like? Why do you ask so many questions? I've only been around 5 years. That's a good answer. Like, I've only been around 5 years. There's a lot of stuff I don't know. Good answer. Great answer. I love that script writing. And Mr. Wilson gladly answers. He's like, he's got a point. Safe looks like books, so that way if a thief comes in, you won't recognize it. And here's where Dennis is really smart here. He's like, what's the combination to your lock? And he's like, that's the last person in the world I tell that to. He's like, you got it written down somewhere? And he's like, it's in my head. And he's like, what's that mean? It means I remember it. He's like, what if you forget it? He's like, I won't forget it. It's a familiar number. I won't forget it. Like, what's that mean? It means it's a number I use all the time, so I won't forget it. So he's giving him clues with it, like Dennis is being curious. He's like, I use it all the time. He's like, oh, I bet I know what it is. He's like, I doubt that. He's like, I bet it's your address. And then Mr. Wilson just looks at the screen, a little bit of fourth wall breaking right there, and he's like, "You want to know how I know? My friend's got a like on his bike, and he uses his one for his address for the combination. So you're just as smart as he is." He's like, "You got everything figured out, don't you, Mr. Wilson?" He's like, "Well, I haven't figured out how to get my work done with you in the house." And then Dennis just leans up against me. He's like, "That's a tough one." Uh, that was a very good scene. I actually like that scene where Mr. Wilson is neutral. He's not being grumpy, and yet he's not being too lovable either. He's like neutral, and then Dennis is also neutral in that scene because he's not driving Mr. Wilson crazy, at least not too much. So, and at this point, Dennis is just making a huge mess in the bathtub. So, and Martha is just all about it because she's always wanted kids, and she's just enjoying the fact that she's got a kid in the house for a few days. She always wanted to be a mom. So, or maybe it was just she's just enjoying having Dennis. And Dennis is playing with Mr. Wilson's friggin' some of his medicine as always. He's always playing with something. Oh yeah, 5-year-old kid, he just doesn't know any better. But well, in this movie, they're obviously, oh my gosh, he's replacing the liquid with plaque attack. Replacing the medicine with plaque attack. So when Mr. Wilson takes it later, he starts like going nuts. Plaque attack mouthwash. Oh man. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And he's replacing the plague attack with Oh, toilet cleaner. Not gonna lie, Mr. Wilson's garden looks really good. He's got like all sorts of flowers in his garden. Looks really nice. Little conversation. It's like, how old is this bed? It belonged to my mother. Like, oh, what's she sleeping on? Been gone for many years, Dennis. And they have a little conversation about that. And then she offers to recite a poem that she grew up with. And Dennis is like, is it about flowers and lambs? He's like, no. And he's like, okay. He never he never heard it before, and basically after that, like he first he's like, never heard that before, and then he ends up falling asleep by the time she's done. So just one of the little cute parts of the film, and you see like you get a little very brief scene where dad's in the hotel room in the city and he's thinking about his family while being away, and mom is in the hotel room wherever she's at on her business trip and looking at her ring. Just one of those quote unquote perfect family moments that is displayed in this film. But obviously, if you're an adult, you know that that's definitely not a perfect family. But the imperfections, what can you say? Dennis gets told a story, he goes to sleep. Well, a poem. And then, of course, you got one of the funnier parts of the film. Well, at least when I was a kid, I thought it was fun. A little bit of Home Alone action right here coming up, to a certain degree. Where Mr. Wilson goes to do his night routine, and yeah, we already know what Dennis did with his stuff. Oh, there he is. And he does a full split. That's very hard to do. I don't know if I don't think Walter Matthau could do that for real, but like the effect looked really good. It looked real. If it wasn't him, it definitely looked real. And Walter Matthau's his Mr. Wilson's facial expressions are awesome. Oh, and those new pajamas of his are like torn open now. Like new pajamas. God bless him. Uh-oh. Black Attack, which is not really Black Attack, but then poor thing. Wish he'd get that hernia fixed. So she thinks it's his hernia. Uh-oh. Now he gets the nostril thing or whatnot. It's prescription too, but yeah, not in this. He's got mouthwash and his nasal spray and his Black Attack up his nose, basically. Oh man. Dog will start barking, wakes Dennis up, and he decides to go and check on his dog. Actually, what he does is he doesn't just check on his dog, he kind of sneaks the dog into the house. And over here again, we go from comedy to like slight drama to where they get in a little bit of a conversation. So like, was Dennis in our bathroom? She's like, yes. A little rat put mouthwash in my nasal spray and toilet plunger in my mouthwash. Toilet cleanser in my mouth. Like, what would he do something like that? Must you ask? And she's really happy about reciting a poem for Dennis that her mom used to tell her, and she wants to share this moment with him. And Mr. Wilson's like, 10 o'clock, Martha, stop, don't talk about regrets. And she said, I would have been a good mother. And then he said, I would have made a swell fireman. And yeah, he's not happy with his responses. Goes downstairs to make, and she's pissed off at the fact that she can't share a nice moment with him. And he's like, I didn't decree that we wouldn't have children, Martha. That was out of both of our hands. And she's like, this isn't about having children or not having children. She's like, I can't tell you something good, Like I'm failing something very good and I'm not able to tell you about it. So in her way, she's basically making a hell of a point. So, and in this scene coming up, you actually get to see that George Wilson is actually a person that like does care, because eventually, bothers him and he can't sleep either, and goes downstairs to talk to her, and he's like, so he kind of, in his way, he kind of apologized to us, and he's in the living room, or he stops by the living room and he thinks he's talking to Martha, and he says he's not really good with feelings and emotions. And he says he would have actually liked a son or a daughter. And it's Dennis's dog, but Mr. Wilson doesn't know it yet because the color of the dog's hair is similar to Martha's. And he's got his eyes closed and he thinks he's about to kiss her. But it's the dog. And he kisses the dog. And Martha's like, George. He's like, what the hell? He opens his eyes and there's the dog. And the dog's like, and then he just smiles. And Martha just goes to laugh. And he kicks the dog out of the house. Hey, cool. They're in Mr. Wilson's basement or whatnot, or I don't know. And Dennis is looking at an old school peep show magazine, and Wilson's like, "Put that away. It's not for kids." Old school music. Mothballs. Is that what it is? Mothballs? Yeah, they don't smell good. And he made a mess, and now he's whistling, acting all natural, like he didn't do anything. Cool. There's a canoe. He's got a canoe on the ceiling. And upon seeing this scene, I'm sure a lot of parents were like, "Oh no." When Dennis sees rope or buttons and stuff like that, he kind of can't help it. And of course, the canoe. Dennis Dennis kind of pulls the rope. Oh wow! Those mothballs. Mr. Wilson tripped on him, and then the canoe goes down, and it barely misses his pee pee. And they're the garden landers right there. They were in the canoe. Go figure. And they just cover Mr. Wilson up. And Mr. Wilson is actually pissed because when Dennis gets one of those lanterns, like out of where his head is at, he just looks at Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson's like pissed, and he's like, you know what? I think I'm gonna go outside and play. And Dennis's parents are not going to be home in time, specifically mom, because there's a storm that is delaying her flight. So they get some more time with Dennis. Martha, of course, is not worried, but Mr. Wilson's got a big garden showing thing coming up, and he doesn't want Dennis around. Yeah. So, coincidence, huh? And then, you got George doing the whole garden lantern thing. And then mom's asking, she knows that George is not going to be happy about this. And then George is like, over my dead body. This is my crowning moment of retiring life, and I'm not throwing it away for the kid. And George Wilson, the last thing he needs is Dennis around with everything going on. And now Martha actually gets pissed at him. Just like, basically says, you're an old grump. And George just does his thing. And the kids are actually done with their fort at the end of the movie. You don't see too much progress with the fort up until, like, there was the start of the movie, and then now it's like at the finish, and they got it all painted and shit. And the little girl's like, now we can order furniture and major appliances. Ah, yes, and we haven't seen him in a little while. Our friendly neighborhood thief, or robber, as the kids like to call him, taking a stroll down the neighborhood. And my favorite part of this scene is, like, obviously, you got all the everybody showing up for Mr. Wilson's, garden thing, but like he's got, like, in this particular scene, he's got like a really nice, like, table full of like desserts that gets absolutely destroyed in this film. And it's like, damn, those desserts like look really yummy. You're talking like regular cake, cheesecake, and everything in between, you name it, like a big long table of it. So Dennis is like, hey, look, cheek pinchers. And he's right. The older women are like, oh, look at that little boy over there. Oh my gosh, he's so cute. They start pinching his cheeks. And for the first time in the film, you actually see Dennis get tortured to a certain degree like that. And then Mr. Wilson's like, don't embarrass me. And Dennis is just looking at him like, look at me, dude. Uh-oh. Dennis sees another button. And it's the button to the garage. And there just happens to be the table full of desserts in front of the garage. And of course he presses the button. And there's a huge mess. And I don't think, was it just, no, it wasn't just desserts that was on there. Ugh. Oh, I guess it's just coffee. It was just dessert, but it was a nice freaking dessert table, man. I'm telling you. Dennis knows he's in trouble. And the photo guy just takes pictures of it. Wow, and you know another thing, I'm wondering how much all that dessert and shit costs because that looked really. And Mr. Wilson is pissed. And Dennis is up in his room, and I guess he's gonna stay there. And during this entire ceremony of the flower blossoming, after 40 years, Thief just happens to sneak in the house. And he knows what to look for and get right past that very nice shelf. And he has access to, I guess he knew the combination, like Dennis. But he dropped one of the gold coins and ended up stomping on it, and Dennis heard it, which got him curious. And he goes down the stairs and he notices that his gold coins were stolen. And they're watching the flower blossom for like 10 seconds, or in the middle of this 10 seconds. And Dennis comes out to tell him about the coins. And of course, he misses the blooming of the flower that he's been waiting for 40 years. Now, again, Dennis completely clueless. He just doesn't understand. All he did was he just wanted to go downstairs and warn Mr. Wilson that he's been robbed. But he doesn't fully understand everything that just took place. And yeah, Mr. Wilson's pissed because he didn't get to see that flower blossom because Dennis unknowingly interrupted it. So here's the point where we see Mr. Wilson at his lowest low. And he just tells Dennis, he just speaks his mind right there. He's like calling him selfish and spoiled and a pest, and how he took something from him that he can never get back. And he basically tells him he doesn't know him or anything like that. Yeah, pretty hardcore words to say to a kid, even though you didn't curse at him or anything like that, or even yell at him for that matter. So, and Dennis apologizes and starts to cry, and then decides to take his bike and just run away and completely disappear. And the cops are at his house, and Mom arrives just in time. Well, just after he and just after Dennis runs away. And of course, mom asks where Dennis is, and he ran away. And then there's, you know, between Martha getting robbed and Dennis running away, pretty rough night. And obviously, Dennis like hasn't really been out like this at night, so he's scared. But he's still going. You know, he's out there, and it's really dark and in the forest, and his bike and a whole bunch of noise. And oh, we go forward, and there he is, the thief. And bam, he turns around, stops the bike, and there he is. And from here on out, we basically have our Home Alone moment here, like afterwards. So mom is basically called everybody in the neighborhood, and then Mr. Wilson is sitting all by himself in his front yard and really starts to think about every single time he lost his shit with Dennis, and especially what he just recently said to him. And you could just tell on the expression of his face that he really regrets saying what he said. And he's like, I can't believe I said that. So he basically gets, he takes it upon himself to go look for Dennis himself. So he's going to search for him himself. So, but at this point right now, he's basically close to the fort, to where he's also, below the bridge, and he's below the fort. They're under the bridge, close to the fort, to where the kids painted it and all that stuff. So he's like, I can only be your hostage until tomorrow morning. I've got church in the morning. He's like, you're not going to church. You and me are catching a train at midnight, and we're out of here. He's like, I have to tell my mom and dad first, or else they'll worry. You have to stop at my house, and I got to get clean underwear, my camera. I have to tell my parents to feed my fish. And then at this point right now, the kid's like already annoying him. He's like, put a cord in it, you're giving me a headache. And he's like, I can't shut my mouth because my nose is stuffy. Like, keep your mouth open, but just don't talk. It's like, where do you put the cork when you put a cork in it? That's funny. I could see adults laughing at that one. Like, what's a yap? It's your mouth. And then he finally just says, shut up. And at this point, he shows him his slingshot. He's like, I'm a real good shot. You want to see this? And this guy's just really concerned with just getting the bean can open. Finally gets it open. And Dennis is like, can you watch me for a minute, mister? And he's like, I'll tell you when to look. And he fires he fires a rock at the tree that bounces off the tree somehow and then just hits him in the head. Home Alone moments. I love it. That's funny. Uh, yep, definitely Home Alone. This at this point right now, he's almost no different than Marv. You know, when you get a rock that's on fire that just falls into your underwear and you go nuts and you have to jump in the water. And at this point, Dennis really starts, you know, he's like, I'm not really having a fun camping trip. And he's like, and he goes to tie him by his ankles. And he's like, you're doing it wrong. He's like, get lost. I've tied up many people. He's like, okay, you never tied up a 5-year-old. I'll just get out. He's like, I'll tie it. So I'll tell you won't be able to move. And he's like, yep, just keep doing it. I'll just keep getting out. Like, the rope's too big and my legs are too small to make it tight enough. He's like, there's only one way to do it, and I know. Many people try to tie me up, but it doesn't work. Just do it your way. I'll get it. I'll get out. Doing it. And then he just stops and he looks at him and he's like, what do you do different? And then he starts demonstrating on him. So he ties him up. He's like, first you got to tie up each leg by itself. Then you tie them together. And you can tell he's really into this because he's learning a new way to tie somebody. So he's like, okay. And now he's all tied up. It's like, no matter how much I wiggle, I can't ever get out. Like a professional tire right here. And he's like, if you really don't want me to move at all, he just grabs the guy's cuff and then he cuffs his hand onto the rope. And he's like, here, bend down. He like literally pulls him down. He's like, you can't get out of that at all, right? Like, nope. Tie me up like that, no matter how much I try, I can't ever get out. He's like, thanks. Now let me loose. He's like, get the handcuff key. It's in my bag. So Dennis thinks this is a camping trip or whatnot, but obviously it's not. And Dennis goes to grab the key, but then he trips over and drops the key into the pot of beans. And it's really funny to figure out. And it's really funny when you see what he tries to do in order to get the beans back. Uh, he's like, oops. And he's like, what? And then he got the whole neighborhood, like kids and everybody. Kids, parents, everybody's looking for Dennis. Like even Joey got one of the sewer caps up and is calling for Dennis. He's like, I'm gonna kill you, kid. He's like, how? You can't even move. Open up. He's like, I'm not hungry. He's like, it's the only way we're gonna get the key. You can't waste food and you gotta eat dinner. Oh, this is a funny part of the movie. I'm telling you this. He like basically force feeds him, but it's really hot, so he's like, is that too hot? Wow, and he actually makes him eat the whole thing. And he's a master beans all over his face, and he's like, uh-oh. He's like, what? He's like, you must have swallowed it. He's like, I swallowed my allowance once and I had to wait a whole night and a day to get it back. Ooh, nice fart. Causes the flame to go. Uh, yeah, I don't think I'd recommend anybody farting too close to fire. Although I'm sure people have done it. And this poor guy is all tied up and he can't move. But he finds his knife. His knife was just chilling there, so he finds his knife and he's like crawling towards it and stuff. And he's like, Hey, I get to I finally get out. And Dennis goes up top in order to get some firewood and to drop it down, but it hits the guy in the head. Boom! Another Home Alone moment. That actually really happened, that guy would have been dead. Either dead or close to it. Permanent head injury. Ah, poor little Milam, he must be exhausted. Better cover him up so he doesn't catch. And he goes searching like through his stuff. Oh wait, first he has to first he's looking for the blanket and then he's gonna search his stuff. Right. Drag the blanket over the. He's just trying to be a sweet kid. He's just not noticing the simple things, of course. Oh man, the guy finds all some of the stuff that he stole, including a purse with money in it. And there's another one thing with jewelry. And then Dennis is like, "Holy smokes, he's rich!" After just getting some cash out. The poor guy's on fire. Well, that part of him is on fire, and then he gets the guy's bag and tries to beat the flames out. Trying to put the flames out, and is just hitting him. Again, the kid means well, but it's just kind of funny how all this shit happens. Yay! Fall in the water. Ugh. Loving all these Home Alone moments. I'm telling you. Not quite as good as Home Alone, but hey, it is what it is. Plus, Kevin, I think, was 8 in the first film. And then he was like, I don't know, maybe 10 in the second film. There's Margaret. She's like crying over Dennis. The guy's still, poor thief is still handcuffed and he's in the water. He's like, shouldn't don't jump in the river with handcuffs. You can drown. Goes on top of the bridge with some rope. Tries to help the guy. It's a good thing I know a lot about ropes. And it's also revealed that Mr. Wilson taught Dennis how to tie knots. See, this goes to show you that he's that little kid. Pretty smart. Don't underestimate kids. Moral of the story. And as the thief slowly gets out of the water through the rope with Dennis's help, Dennis turns around and notices that he recognizes some gold coins, and he notices that it's Mr. Gold. And then he's like, "How come you got it?" He's like, "I stole it." He's like, "You're a robber? I'm a thief." And he's like, "Oh." But that train ends up dragging the rope, and Dennis luckily gets saved that way. But yeah, this is the moment right here where it's revealed, well, at least to Dennis, that this guy's a thief, and he's got the knife in his hands and stuff like that. So things are about to get ugly, but the train saves him. Oh, at this point right now, this guy's about to kill the kid. But thankfully, the rope and the train, yeah. Now, if this were to actually happen, this guy would have been dead. He would have been cut in half, obviously. The knife coming back down after he falls and just lands on his butt. And the good old cartoon sound effects. And it's the next morning at this point, and got the paper guy doing the delivery. And of course, just like the movie started, you're going to hear Dennis's bike and the cans make all the noise, and everybody's really happy that Dennis is back. And yeah, basically, the movie came full circle. And Mr. Wilson didn't even sleep on his bed. He was just sleeping in his front yard, maybe hoping that Dennis would show up or something. But waking up sadly, of course. And yep, you definitely hear. Yep, you're hearing Dennis's bike. Oh wait, no, you're not. Or maybe you're not hearing it yet. Maybe you have to walk inside the house, and then after, like just before you walk inside the house, you'll hear it, and then you'll come out. Yes, I watched this movie a lot when I was a kid. You remember things, but it's a pretty solid 90-minute movie or so, give or take. Um, Family type of movie that has a lot of simple humor to it with some Home Alone elements. And back in the day when this movie came out, it really was like it was. I don't want to say it was a Home Alone clone because it wasn't, but these kind of movies were really popular. People were suckers for this sort of thing back in the '90s more than ever now. Right now, nowadays, Dennis the Menace movies go straight to Blu-ray or whatever, so or straight to streaming or whatever it is. So things have changed. Oh, this wow, the poor thief. He's like really screwed up, and if you look at his face, it's like damn. And Mr. Wilson right now is the caring, loving old man at this point. So, and Dennis got Mr. Wilson's gold back. Mom and dad are in town, but they haven't seen their kid yet in over a day, so they're glad that their kid is okay. And the poor thief is like, help. Oh, and another thing, just realized how strong Dennis is. I mean, granted, I mean it's obviously fake, but in the movie, Dennis is pretty damn strong because he was riding his bike, and he was carrying a full grown man on the back of his bike while pedaling. So oh, interesting scene. It just goes to show you that it's just so much he doesn't know. But he's like, you can tell her, and the cops are telling the thief, he's like, you can tell everybody in the big house that you met Dennis Mitchell. So He goes to give the guy he goes to give him his knife back. Actually, he's like, "Hey, you forgot something." And he's like, "Oh, oh." And then he points the knife at him, and the cop goes to close the door, and it hits the guy in the arm and drops the knife. That's so funny. Oh, that's so funny. And the poor, and then the cross-eyed kid or whatnot that he took, that the thief stole the apple from him, just waving by to him and stuff like that. That's so. And at the end over here, just before we go into the credits, we see Dennis messing around with the marshmallow, right? With the flaming marshmallow. Okay, cool. And then you got the parents and Mr. and Mrs. Wilson talking, and at this point, she's talking about how she's going to get Dennis into the gate, into the daycare center, and Mr. Wilson's like, "What the heck is he going to do all day? Right next door, we can watch him." And Martha's like really happy about that, and she's all about it. And then the parents are like, "No, no, 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 no! You have to understand all those other times that Dennis has upset you." He's like, "This is a new ball game. I've learned a few things. Kids are kids. You have to play by their rules." So again, some character development stuff like that, and you see the different side to Mr. Wilson. But what happens here causes Dennis to go into daycare anyway, according to the end credit scene, because that marshmallow just hits Mr. Wilson in the forehead. Oh shit! And that's how the film ends. We go into credits, but there's a credit scene where Dennis is at daycare, and you got that woman that couldn't cover for Mrs. Mitchell, forcing her to have to travel. And Dennis basically presses the button to the copy machine, and she kind of gets sucked into the copy machine, gets a whole bunch of pictures of her face taken, and yeah. And apparently the daycare lady that's in charge of watching the kids was like, if she had to look at me for 5 more seconds, she'd jump out the window. It's like, can I push the button? And she's like, no, you don't know which button to push. And Dennis is like, it's this one, and then he pushes it. Funny. And then obviously the movie ends right after she gets a whole bunch of pictures taken, and she's like screaming. And now the copy machine won't suck you in like that, just an FYI. That's funny. Especially when you look at her face. Dennis makes her run for it, I guess, going back into the daycare room. Funny. Pretty good copy machine for back in the 90s, I'll tell you what. It was turning out stuff pretty quick. And that's Dennis the Menace. A really simple comedy, very basic, but at the same time, if you're around my age, which is 38, you're gonna get some juggles out of it here and there. And there's a few lines here and there that'll make you laugh, but for the most part, it's like an old school comedy that's not crazy funny, but it'll still make you chuckle here and there with a few things. So yeah, but yeah, I eventually I'll get around to doing Home Alone, so which is like the all-time classic. But anyway, Dennis the Menace, good old good old classic movie. So hope you enjoyed watching along for those of you that did, and hope you had fun. And I'll catch you on the next one.